Welcome to Rings and Things, where we discuss Tolkien adaptations and texts.
We're just two hobbits from the Shire, one bringing the other along on this adventure.
I'm your host, Agnes, and this is my co-host,
Recurring guest star,
JD. Today we're covering the final installment of Rings of Power to date. And like usual, we're going to be breaking up the episodes according to storyline, but this was more difficult for this episode than most because the storylines are really merging and coming together, and the characters who defined one particular storyline previously are suddenly ending up in two or three other storylines.
Yeah, it felt like to me there was only maybe two distinct actual storylines, and that wouldn't do really for our script.
No, so come along with me as I show you what storylines I came up with, what common threads I found.
So you named this first one the Siege of Eregion.
So in the Siege of Eregion section, I have basically everything going on about the battle that we have, all the action sequences, what Elrond is up to.
Yeah, it's mostly Elrond dealing with the siege, but like you were mentioning that this kind of clams things up. This is the same geographical location as where Sauron and Celebrimbor are for, a majority of these two episodes.
Yeah, exactly. It's all happening in Eregion, so the Eregion storyline no longer works as a storyline. Here we have the Siege of Eregion happening outside the battle, and we're going to have what's happening inside as a separate discussion point.
The orcs begin their attack. They dam up a river so they don't have to cross a choke point of a bridge, but I don't know how they use some siege weapons to block it off. It just seems a little bit too convenient, though, for the orcs.
And I would imagine even if the river did stop flowing there pretty quickly, it would be incredibly muddy.
Yeah, it would not be easy. It would probably still be easier for everyone to poke through the bridge,
Yeah, bringing heavy siege equipment across a freshly a freshly not riverbed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even like you said, it's muddy. There might be small ponds, and it was a big river. Just blocking off the flow. I feel like it would be a lot of stagnant water in little spots. It would be a real mess to try to do that. I love a good siege. I think a siege, the dynamics of it lead to a good story. There's usually some good tension. However, the timing and central tension of this siege, will Adar stop Sauron from creating the rings while Celebrimbor is under a spell? Something feels off about mostly the timing. There was not a very good amount, or it didn't feel like there was a good amount of buildup or tension. You can't tell, if it's been a few hours or a few days, but it all feels very quick from when Adar left last episode to almost breaching the gate.
Mm-hmm. Do you think anything about what feels off has to do with the idea that Sauron creates 9 rings for men?
Yeah, that might also be a bit of an issue because we know exactly that he's not going to be able to prevent it. Otherwise, then ring wraiths wouldn't exist in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So that might be part of the problem. But even still, I feel like even if I didn't know whether or not the rings could be created in time or not, if that were up for question, it doesn't feel like the timeline for the siege really felt right to me. That being said, I did like kind of how some of the drama went on for the siege later. It's to start off it started moving really quick, and sieges usually just don't feel so fast paced. I didn't like that it felt so fast paced, honestly.
Yeah, sieges are kind of by definition a long time.
Yeah. The elves do show up to the siege. Everything after this scene, I think it starts to relax a bit because it's less of a siege and more of a battle in a city. They kind of broke past getting through the walls and stuff. Do elves? We've never really seen elves have a cavalry charge like this before. Is this something that I know elves would have cavalry, but is this something that is ever mentioned upon in the books at all?
I don't remember every description of the battle details in the Silmarillion, I will admit. But I don't remember anything about elven cavalry charges offhand.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this might be banking off the Rohirrim, which they were the cavalry of Lord of the Rings. So it made sense for them there. But I feel like you always see elves mostly as foot soldiers and with a lot of archery type attacks. You don't see him doing like a heavy charge very often in the other works that I've seen.
Yeah. Like I said, I can't think of any elven cavalry charges offhand, but we should totally watch out and see if we find any now.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying, again, like, elves are, just sentient beings who have access to the same technology as everybody else, and a cavalry charge does make sense in this. I just kind of have an eye out for that sort of thing, and I don't know how much of this they were just trying to bank off of Rohirrim arriving in the fields of Pelennor? Fields of Pelennor?
Yeah, the Pelennor fields. I definitely see the parallel, and I saw the parallel when I was watching it as well. I think that parallel may be intended.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm trying not to complain about it because, I keep saying, on one hand, it makes sense in this circumstance to have that battlefield tactic. It's just, I feel like even if they had to have cavalry, like, against the orcs, maybe like a light cavalry ranged, like, picking them off and, like, surrounding them and encircling them might have been better than a direct charge.
Yeah.
Something like that. We do get to see Galadriel and Arondir on the same battlefield now. I don't know if we've ever seen them directly interact before.
I don't think so. I think this is their first time interacting on screen.
They seem to know each other, or at least Arondir definitely knows of Galadriel, which I guess I shouldn't be too surprised.
I mean, it makes sense. She was commander of the Northern armies.
Yes. Yeah, she's a bit of a celebrity, it seems like. I do... So one thing I really like about this siege, and I said this about... Some of the action scenes in The Hobbits is I really like seeing Elrond like fight and command. I feel like it's cool to see the generals on the back lines doing grand strategy in the Fellowship of the Ring, actually putting their time in with the rank and brass, going and like earning their stripes, so to speak, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. It is fun to see that sort of thing.
There was a scene where Elrond was speaking to an elf. She got messed up by a lot of arrows, which is always nice to see, I guess, for me.
You like those deadly arrows? Yeah,
I'm a fan of deadly arrows. It's just so often that they seem like an inconvenience. So when they aren't, it speaks to me. The orcs had a secret weapon. It was just a troll. It kind of felt a little underwhelming.
Around this time, the orcs have some tar that they're taking out that the elven archers managed to blow up. And I wanted to note that evil set its stage for its own setback here because, it brought out this flammable tar.
Yeah.
And then the good guys set it aflame for them just at the wrong spot. And then to continue this theme, I think the troll plays a role in that sending out Damrod the troll is explicitly evil, knowing that it will hurt itself to get the end that it wants.
Yeah.
Because, Adar knows that Damrod is going to kill orcs.
It's very explicitly spelled out for us.
Yeah, so he is willing to hurt his own side to achieve whatever particular end he wants at the time.
Yeah, I think it gets resolved pretty quickly. There is a lot of back and forth in this fight where it seems like both sides are going to get the upper hand, which is keeps it entertaining to watch. Gil-galad is there. We see he's on the front lines fighting. I do feel like there's a scene where the sun comes. It seems like it came pretty quickly because it was extremely dark in night, just the previous scene. Like I said, the sense of time is kind of hard to tell in this show sometimes.
Yeah, and these are the kind of things that I'm not very sensitive to sometimes.
He said, look to the north when the sun was rising. Does the sun rise in the north?
No. It's supposed to rises in the east and sets in the west.
Yeah, he said, look to the north. The dwarves are coming, because he thought his friends were coming. It was just one rider or something, but it was right. His back was to the sunrise. So that line just seems very confusing to me.
I did not notice this at all.
Also, the orcs, quick question about the sunrise. They're fighting in the sun? I thought they couldn't do that.
They should be able to, no.
Maybe they're just working through the pain.
Yeah, I mean, guess. They're going to get really bad sunburn if they do.
It kind of makes it seem like the orcs kind of are questioning like if they should retreat. It kind of puts that like a better reason. Like the orcs don't want to fight in this toxic burning sunlight.
That would make sense.
I get that Elrond's bummed out that the dwarves aren't there, but he's in such despair that he is not even like fighting. He's just to his knees while his friends are all battling for their lives, which I was like, come on, Elrond.
Yeah, I get that he could have had a better reaction there. But from a storytelling perspective, I actually really like that Elrond's expectations are subverted, because eucatastrophe is not something that can be counted on.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great subversion. Like, I've referenced at least a few times the a couple of different battles in Lord of the Rings, actually, but the people showing up at sunrise to save them is, been done many times now. At least twice, right? It was in Helm's Deep, and then also Pelennor Fields in the movies, and then it's the War of the Rohirrim also referenced those two armies coming to save them, and this was a great subversion of that expectation from this, from Lord of the Rings.
Yep, I agree, and it's a great reminder that an important element of eucatastrophe is not counting on it. Sometimes eucatastrophe doesn't happen. Yeah,
and so they end up eventually all getting captured, and there's a scene they have to beg for Celebrimbor's documents not to get burned, and he seemed like just the way that it was shot, like after he gathered all the information and figured out why he shouldn't burn them, he seemed like he wanted to burn it more because it would just hurt Elrond.
Yeah, typical orcs.
Yeah, it was the sadism of that was next level. I liked it though. And then they escape and they burn that orc or another orc standing nearby, and he lights up really quickly. I thought that was kind of weird. So that was the siege of Eregion. They ultimately lost Eregion, but the escape.
Yeah, we'll pick up with Gil-galad and Elrond in another in a later segment. So next we have the actually never absent storyline for Adar. I talked about maybe he was going to drop out of the storylines we were following. He was present here when I wrote the script. So
he kind of won't be in anymore though.
No. So let's wrap up the character that is Adar.
So it starts off during the siege. They have a parley, which I feel like gets overlooked a lot. It seems like something that's kind of far-fetched, that they all sit down around and talk it out before they start battling. But Adar and Galadriel, well, Galadriel's still at this point captured by Adar, but and Elrond all kind of sit and talk out how to prevent this conflict from happening. During this parley, also, Elrond does get a kiss from... Well, Galadriel gets a kiss from Elrond, I think would be a better verbiage for it. I think it definitely fits his arc. It's kind of sad to know they don't end up together, however.
I have been biting my tongue so hard for the last 7 episodes where you're talking about Elrond and Galadriel having a low-key romance, waiting for you to see this scene.
I technically called it episode 1 with the first scene with Elrond.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it entirely depends on what, if anything, the show wants to do with this scene now that they have it, as to what my opinion of it will be. Sure. At this point, nothing has really come of it, I feel like. They've kissed and nobody's actually talked about it. It's not become a plot point or anything.
Well, yeah, and they were dealing with wrapping up this huge battle.
Exactly. Yeah. So I feel very ambivalent about this right now because I don't have a problem with strictly platonic kissing. But I think that the show could have chosen a less controversial way to pass off the pin, given the fact that people are going to be very readily interpreting this romantically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's still how I'm interpreting it. I'll get into it, but go on and I'll tell you what I think about all of this.
I'm not especially fond of a romance between Elrond and Galadriel personally. That doesn't mean it's bad or shouldn't work for someone else if that's what somebody likes. But it's not the plot line that I personally like to see. Right. I'm going to watch to see what season 3 does, if anything, with this scene. In our appendix to the last episode, I said that the orc family might be the most controversial thing to come out of season 2. If not that, this is the most controversial thing to come out of season 2.
I think, and I agree that, there are 100 ways to do a platonic kiss, but just the way this was framed, it did not come off that way at all.
So one of the things I've heard proposed is that the kiss was filmed platonically,
Mm-hmm.
And then in editing, it became more romantic because the romantic cues come from things like the music swelling and stuff like that, which happen after things are filmed.
Yeah. I think they need to double down on what production went with, though, and this needs to be a sad point for Elrond, because you said he has a tragic story, right? Like, just add this onto the pile. Well, he likes Galadriel, but it doesn't work out with her.
Elrond marries Galadriel's daughter.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, that's the problem with this.
That happens a lot in this kind of fiction, though. Nowadays, it's pretty bad, and it is weird. But there's quite a few examples of characters ending up with somebody else's daughter or son, or other family. It's usually bad characters, though, and Elrond is not. So
absolutely. So it complicates things to have a romance between Elrond and Galadriel. So I want to see what happens in season 3. I want to see what story they're telling.
Galadriel's daughter doesn't exist yet, right?
Not that we know of. She has mentioned Celeborn, and she has mentioned that he's her husband. So
she has in this show mentioned that she has a husband?
Yes, it was. It was with Theo leaving Mordor.
Isn't he presumed dead at this point?
Galadriel thinks he's dead.
Yes. I also feel like maybe elves have slightly different dynamics because they're immortal, about stuff like dating your ex-crush's daughter than a human would, but it's still really weird.
Yeah. I don't know that there's particular rules for that. It just seems weird. I agree.
Yeah, I don't know how much Tolkien would have gotten into some dynamics like that.
I watched an interview with the showrunners about this kiss,
mm-hmm.
where they said that they meant the kiss to be platonic, and that they didn't foresee how controversial this was going to be. Now, I find the claim that they didn't foresee its controversy to strain my credibility.
Right.
But I think that I wonder if this might say more about how sheltered and inexperienced the showrunners are. I don't want to accuse them of lying.
Okay, I do think they're lying. I think that they were testing the waters, and as soon as there was controversy, they're backpedaling now.
Rings of Power has had so much controversy since it was first conceived and announced.
Mm-hmm.
Does it need any more?
Yeah, I don't think they wanted more. I think that they're trying to tend to the fire of the controversy they started with this. I do think that they knew what they were doing, though. And now they're just lying because they don't know what else to do. I don't know. I just think the showrunners messed up and are afraid to own up to it. And I think that it would be a lot better if they, even if it did kind of make Elrond a little weird, just owned up to it and went through. I think backing out's the worst decision here. But like you said, we'll have to see what they do later. If the show can gracefully back out of it, like the interview seems a little cowardly. If the show can do it in a way that feels feasible and, internally consistent with its own logic about how to make it seem platonic, then I will accept that. But just from an interview saying that's how it was intended, I don't know.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions. But so I'm just going to hold off my opinion until I see more.
Also, so during this parlay, other than this, they're speaking to Adar, but why do they decide to still fight him? Like, I feel like their best chance would be to back off, and if it fails, continue the siege almost. Like, not fighting him directly. It would be... I get that Eregion's filled with elves that they care about, but they should... Sauron's like the ultimate goal to defeat here, right? And arguably, the orcs could have had Sauron if the elves helped or didn't interfere.
Yeah.
Close. Like, he barely got away.
I imagine it's because they don't want to ally with the orcs and have to deal with the cruelty that these orcs have. I mean, you saw how they burned those scrolls, the kind of cruelty that they have. I
could argue, too, that, and I think that more accurate it is to say that Adar should be listening to Elrond and doing whatever he... First of all, they didn't even have an alternative to suggest how to stop him,
Mm-hmm. So,
like, what would be the plan of the elves? I want to hear what they wanted to do going forward, and if it makes more sense than what... Because Adar at least was doing something. It might have been bad. I feel like the elves didn't have any sort of plan to stop Sauron from creating the Nine Rings of Men.
Did they know about them?
No, I suppose that's not true, but they should, and I guess maybe this is an elf thing, but they should be doing something to stop him before he can do something, they should be taking him out as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But elves, I get, like, again, their long lifespan makes them feel like they don't need to rush as much. Adar is or was an elf, though, and maybe that's why he doesn't like identifying as an elf.
Yeah, maybe.
He says that he loves the orc too much to allow them to fall to Sauron. It's kind of touching in a way, I will admit, but it's denying their autonomy, which I get it. Like, he thinks he's their dad. He's literally being, like, paternalistic. That still doesn't mean he needs to fight until the last orc. I always love to say they could just run. They don't need to. That's not the only two choices.
And I think this is meant to show how twisted Adar's love for his orcs is at some level.
I mean, he has a very good point and he's right about what happens to the orcs and how it ends up going for them, though, too. Like, they fall to Sauron, and Sauron treats them horribly for the rest of, as far as we know, forever, until Sauron falls.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I still think it could have been smart for them to just get out of there and hold up in Mordor or something.
Yep. That would have been the better choice.
Also, this is a very hot take. Our discussions earlier and how some of the shows depicted Adar and him being an Uruk, is this slightly coded as, like, a metaphor for being trans? Specifically, he was talking about his new name reminded me much of not dead naming people. I know this could really come off as an issue. I feel like, specifically when he's talking about his identity and his name, it's where my mind went to.
And I can see this as an application of the material. It's not one I thought of or have heard anything about. It doesn't seem particularly flattering to me.
No, I mean, I like Adar, though, so... If I know, maybe my humanization of Adar also allowed me to notice this parallel, where if I just saw him as a pure villain, I wouldn't have picked up on it.
Yeah.
I think maybe it says more about what my belief on personal identity is, that, you know, Adar really is, it's hard to call him an elf anymore. I think he actually has shed being an elf and is an Uruk, and his birth name is irrelevant at this point.
Mm-hmm. There's lots of renaming that happens in the Legendarium. Lots of people get and take new names.
Well, yeah, there's the whole arc about the stranger finding his name and stuff like that. But I feel like specifically just the way he described his name being given to him versus the name he earned just reminds me a lot of when people decide to go by a new name. And that's, maybe it's the only example I have of people renaming themselves. And that's the only parallel I could draw.
And that's what I'm proposing, is understanding Adar's renaming in the context of what renaming means in the Legendarium.
Yeah.
Because renaming is something that happens with some frequency, especially in the Silmarillion.
I mean, I think even there's a few things in Lord of the Rings where they have, Aragorn has a few names, I feel like, in the actual movies. You mentioned that Sauron has a ton of names.
Yeah, he's got a few. Aragorn definitely is contender for most names ever. Another contender for that is a character from the Silmarillion named Turin Turambar. Mm-hmm. He gets like 9 new names over the course of his story. I
feel like maybe the reason that I noticed this with Adar and not, for example, Aragorn's extra names or Sauron's renaming or the stranger finding a name is he seemed to have a sort of disdain and hatred for his old name, and seems to take offense to somebody wanting to call him. Where the rest don't, they seem to use them more interchangeably, maybe.
Which is why I bring up Turin Turambar, because he actually rejects his old names from time to time. Is
this a character I'll meet once I read the books?
He's in the Silmarillion. He's mentioned in the Lord of the Rings occasionally, so I'll talk about him, you know, in the context of when we see his name, perhaps. But we're not going to get to his story until the Silmarillion. Yeah. He has a very complicated and tragic story.
Yeah. I'm excited. Is he an elf? I'm guessing he's an elf.
No, he's a man. He's a human.
This character sounds pretty interesting to me then.
Yeah, he's got a very interesting story.
Oh, one more thing about Adar and the trans parallel here. His name change also comes with an identity change too, where the other characters that doesn't always necessarily happen. Like that's maybe also another parallel. I hate to say, like, for all my trans friends, like, this is a good representation, because, like, Adar's pretty evil still. He's like a scary dark villain and stuff. So I mean no bad blood. It's just a parallel that I really noticed in this last scene with him.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I'm resistant to it is it's not flattering, and it also doesn't come with any extra context to work with.
I think the interesting thing about it is it kind of helps me empathize with Adar more.
Okay.
I feel for him not identifying as an elf. And I mean, there's a whole laundry list of implications and stuff like that I am not trying to dip my toe into at all. It's just, again, this dialogue really reminded me of this. This also, Adar kind of...
Well, in light of this conversation, I also want to add that when I called Adar an elf in previous episodes, I was not intending any disrespect to the trans community.
No, it's not a one-to-one parallel, so... Right, yes. Yeah, and talking about species is different than gender identity, so it's not... Like this might be a little too hairy for me to even bring up, but it's really where my mind thought very heavily when he was talking about his name.
And I think it's understandable that you thought of it.
And then he has a very sudden turn. He gives up the Elven Ring of Power. If I thought it was going to be a trick, seems like he's just absolutely being a hero here.
Adar has a redemption arc, and this
very short, unfortunately.
Well, very short, unfortunately, but he stayed a pretty good guy until it was short.
Yeah, I feel like he made some wrong choices, but he was, of all the, like, I liked Wolf and War of the Rohirrim as a villain because he was understandable evil, but I feel like Adar was almost an anti-hero. Like, he was bordering onto anti-hero territory.
Yeah, I can see that. But yeah, he gets a full-on redemption arc.
Yeah, I knew things were going too smoothly.
Adar choosing to and being able to give up the Elven Ring back to Galadriel is itself an interesting choice, that he has that relationship to the ring. Like, this is something that Galadriel would struggle with.
Right.
But Adar manages to rise to the challenge. And I want to measure this choice against a complete story, as I keep saying. Who all can manage to give up rings, and why do they do it? Or why do they not do it?
I think if the Elven rings have even a similar, but obviously not parallel or identical, like maybe a difference of quantity or maybe even a difference of kind, but still have a magnetic attraction to them that makes them hard to give up or attracts you to them. And we see other people struggling to give it up, but Adar gives it up easily. It really, I think, will season his character in such a way that it really gives him that, like, was this guy really a villain at all, or just a misguided hero who didn't have, the options available to him or he thought he didn't have the right options available to him to make good choices,
Or maybe he didn't have the right options available to him until this moment, and then here he found the opportunity to make a good choice, and he finally chose to take it.
Yeah, I almost want them to make it so that this doesn't happen a lot later where other people give it up easy, and it's just a weird thing that Adar can do, because I almost feel like, there's black and white morality, there's good and bad, but I feel like he's almost on a different spectrum outside of good and bad. Like, he does good and bad things. It's almost like saying that he's like orange on a black and white scale of morality. Like, he's just out there. I mean, really, if we had to simplify it, I would still say he lands into a villain, a bad person. But, like, his justifications, his thought patterns, everything else, he's not a power-hungry egomaniac villain, I feel like he has goals that are very understandable and I can empathize with, and I feel like he does some very terrible things, obviously, to justify them, which never plays out well. In real life, I'd argue too, but definitely not in Lord of the Rings.
And I think Sauron's the same way, the way he's being depicted here as well. He wants to heal Middle-earth. He's here to save Middle-earth from darkness. It's a different quest that he's on than Adar, but he's got this good quest that he's trying to accomplish. And I would say that Adar, up until this change of heart with the Elven Ring, is a bad guy. But after the Elven Ring, I would say he legitimately seems to become a good person at this point.
We'll have to see how it plays out in season 3. I do feel like Sauron, Halbrand, we never really see him. He says like he's doing this for all Middle-earth, but I feel like Adar we've actually seen advocating and sticking up for a specific dispossessed people in Middle-earth, you know? And if he does the same thing with men in season 3 or in the lore, then yeah, I could see the parallel there. But so far I feel like it's not quite one-to-one yet.
He's trying to stick up for his people in the Southlands.
Yeah, he does want them free from Adar. Like I said, I want to see more of how Sauron rules. I am so excited for this in the next season.
I hope he doubles down on his identity as King of the Southlands to defend his people.
Yeah, that would be very juicy. I would love that. I think it is ultimately very sad to see orcs kill their only hope for actual society that we've seen.
Yeah, but orcs are self-destructive like that.
Yeah, and hailing Sauron, who will, again, as we say, enslave them for millennia.
Mm-hmm. And also, I want to give a callback to this is the consequence that Adar signed up for when he started doing things like sending Damrod out to kill orcs to get the end that he needed. This is his payment for the ends justify means behavior that he exhibited earlier.
So I know this is a big what if, but if he decided to so brutally seek to get Sauron and just surrounded Eregion until Sauron was handed to him, for example, or was more moral in his actions, do you think if his means were better, do you think the ends would have been actually, in a roundabout way, like more likely to be achieved?
Yeah. I think in this case that's probably the case, and I think his orcs would have been far less likely to et tu brute him.
Yeah.
I mean, they did this for Sauron, now they're doing it for him.
Yeah.
And I think they would have been less likely to do that if he had used better means earlier in these very episodes.
That does make sense, and that is a prime example of evil in doing itself.
Exactly. Continuing our evil streak.
Yeah, and going on into Sauron. This is going to be jumping back in the timeline, but
yeah, back in the Siege of Eregion, what's going on inside as opposed to outside.
Yeah, I think so. Sauron says something about enjoying his time with Celebrimbor. I think he's genuine. He seems like just the way it's delivered and under my understanding of his character motivation, I think he really did mean this.
I 100% agree. Sauron absolutely enjoyed his time with Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor is the greatest elven smith of the age, and Sauron is absolutely loving his time with someone of such skill.
Yes. Yeah, and I feel like maybe there's a bit of a double meaning, and he means both meanings, because I feel like he just genuinely enjoyed his company, but also enjoyed toying with him.
Yeah, true. Fair. Anatar's gaslighting is very on the nose. It's it's textbook gaslighting. But I choose to interpret this as showing just how deeply he has his claws in Celebrimbor, because unfortunately gaslighting can happen this blatantly and not be seen. Yeah,
I mean, it really is kind of terrifying to see, but stuff like this unfortunately does happen in real life. It just takes a long time to build up to it. But Sauron, Anatar, he has like the direct path in Celebrimbor's mind to get to this as quickly as possible, this level of emotional manipulative control.
Yeah.
But I will say that you sometimes can see relationships like this, especially behind closed doors, after years of gaslighting and stuff like that. But it does feel very sudden for, how presumably, Sauron's only been, or Anatar's only been around in Celebrimbor's life for maybe a few weeks at this point. I also wanted to say that Sauron here was saying, first of all, lying, but then about what Celebrimbor said to do, and he said to, what specifically happened? He said something like, he said to don't do anything, something like that. The waters will keep us safe, and we don't need to respond at all to the catapults being thrown into our castle. But he's like, but that is bad. Celebrimbor's not thinking straight, so I will lead a charge against them, and stuff like that. Like, he completely discredited Celebrimbor to all his peers as well. It goes beyond that, but I thought at first it was very subtle and smart of him.
Absolutely. It's so manipulative, so Sauron. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I also see a parallel between Anatar taking command of Eregion and Gandalf taking command of Minas Tirith. This is what I started thinking of as I was watching the scene.
Yeah.
And this emphasizes the differences between Gandalf and Anatar. Obviously, they're very different people under very different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were saying, Gandalf doesn't deceive to get where he's going. He's not deceiving Denethor into despair like Anatar is deceiving Celebrimbor, and he's not deceiving the city about what's going on with Denethor the way Sauron is deceiving the citizens about what's going on with Celebrimbor. I also noticed that it's Sauron who causes Denethor to despair, so he's just going about deceiving again. He's actually the cause of both of these cities falling apart.
I wonder if any of Denethor's men who were well-read in history thought about Anatar and Celebrimbor and this siege of Eregion and worried that this was what Gandalf was doing.
So ring lore and stuff like that is not well known among the normal people of Gondor. So I would say that you probably don't have many people who would be learned in these things.
Even if it was just one who kept to himself, kept quiet about it, it would be... It's just so one-to-one now. And I didn't notice it when I was watching this either.
Yeah, but Sauron's at the root of both of them.
Yeah, he is. But to the right-hand man of Celebrimbor and the right-hand man of Denethor, it probably felt very similar. Even the only difference is Gandalf was being genuine and Anatar Sauron was not.
Just that little detail.
Just that one little detail. One was pure evil and the other was a good guy. I absolutely like that Celebrimbor catches on to that he's in an illusion using his wits. I really like that character detail about him. He noticed a bug scurrying in the same pattern.
A mouse.
A mouse. Okay. Yeah, a mouse. It would like come and go on a loop. And then, he started pointing out other inconsistencies after that.
Yep. And this is why when you were asking last episode about whether you thought, did the people of Eregion see Celebrimbor walking out with a glazed over look, or were they seeing something else? That this indicates to me that there are limits to Sauron's powers. Yes. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a mouse on loop. He would have actually constructed something that didn't have that flaw. Like
a mouse with primitive coding that could act like an actual mouse.
Yeah, if we want to scientificate this to being a virtual reality or something like that, he would have a more complete code and not just loop his code.
Yeah.
But this indicates to me that there's some limit to his power, and so I think that it would probably overpower Sauron to deceive visually that many people in Eregion when he can just deceive Celebrimbor instead and achieve the same result.
I feel like this might be a bit of column A, a bit of column B, and even a little bit of a secret third column C, where I think, yes, there is a limit to his power. I feel like he could overcome it if he thinks and works at it, but it is tiring. I also think this comes into his pride a little bit, in that he doesn't feel like he needs to put all that extra effort in because
I love that.
He doesn't trust that Celebrimbor will figure it out. And I think column C, I said, this is my third secret thing, is he also wants to is genuinely convince and deceive the people of Eregion without any illusions, even though I imagine if he really dedicated his power and might to it, he maybe could have them all seeing that there is no siege or something like that. But I think that's less personally enjoyable to him. I think he likes putting himself in the position of power and supplanting Celebrimbor and deceiving all these people at once to make him think he's mad. I think he's kind of manipulating two different people. A lot of people, but there's two different parties. There's Celebrimbor and then there's everybody else in Eregion, and he can get two for the price of one with his lies, and I think he thrives off that. He likes it.
Yeah.
Also, Celebrimbor does notice this, but it's too late to save anyone or do anything. I do wish there was something. I wish there was something that he could have done more to. I wish it would at least have been the start of something that he could have done to resist Sauron more effectively. I don't know what exactly, but I wish there was just anything else that could have happened other than what did, from a storytelling perspective, not just a personal, I feel bad for him perspective,
Yeah. I guess that's the tragic hero, a little Beowulfian.
Yeah. Well, I will say by the end of it, he does kind of I do get my way a bit. I wrote this note like right as he was waking up and he was completely trapped. He does kind of eventually turn a few of his men, but it's after, so there was, is it Merdania?
Yep.
She doubts him and he kills her, which, I mean, it was an accident, but he still killed her. Like, that was pretty brutal.
Sauron killed her.
Oh, I thought Celebrimbor was like Sauron said, come back with me. And he's like, unhand me, and like shoved her and she fell off the wall.
Sauron was the one who magicked her off the wall.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, it's a subtle screenshot, but he absolutely did that. It was not Celebrimbor who did it. Anatar did it and made it look like that was what was happening. But it was entirely Sauron, and he like used magic to do it.
And then, so the way these are interspliced, there's a scene with Durin and King Durin. We'll get more into what that is exactly, but it cuts to another scene back at Regin, and Sauron's opening his eyes after Durin saying that his men can't leave. Prince Durin can't leave because there's an attack on Khazad-dûm. It looks to me like Sauron opening his eyes is him affecting that as well. So I don't know if that's actually in his powers, if he's controlling the dad directly at all or influencing him through the ring or whatnot, but it's what it looked like to me.
Sauron's got his influence everywhere, so
if we're talking about his power being spread out or limited at all, he's not concentrating it just here in Regin, I think, at this point.
Yeah, all the more reason why he's limited on how much he can do for Celebrimbor and puts a mouse on loop.
So I find Sauron a sympathetic villain quite often, but him monologuing to Celebrimbor about his past being hard and blaming him more for choosing to work with him just falls flat to me. Like I feel like Sauron doesn't really gain anything after. Like, I feel like Celebrimbor is awake. He knows he's Sauron. There's not much to gain from, this particular emotional abuse episode.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not well versed enough in how to emotionally abuse and manipulate someone for me to say, but I just assumed it was part of the gaslighting.
Yeah. Also, so eventually Celebrimbor does escape. He has him chained up to make these rings, and he makes the rings and then maims him. He cuts his arm off or something, a part of his hand off to escape.
His thumb off.
His thumb, yeah. So he could escape the cuffs. Why would he make the rings and then do this?
Well, this might not be a satisfactory in-universe answer, but the thing that jumps to my mind about this as a literary device is that, first of all, Anatar called Celebrimbor the Lord of the Rings when he emerged from the fire. And 2, Sauron and Frodo are also termed the Lord of the Rings at various points. And Sauron and Frodo each lose a finger too.
So Anatar calls Celebrimbor Lord of the Rings, and then I think Celebrimbor calls Sauron Lord of the Rings back.
Yeah, later on in this episode. Wow. And I mean, the Lord of the Rings title for the books is meant to apply to Sauron.
Yeah, that's interesting. Anybody who gets deemed with this the Lord of the Rings loses a digit. I like that.
Yeah. But now for an in-universe explanation, I think he wanted to escape and go see what good he could do yet. And I mean, he runs into Galadriel and has an experience with her to explain what has happened. It provides a way for Celebrimbor's side of the story to be accounted for. Up until this point, he hasn't really been able to tell anyone what's happened.
It just is confusing to me.
Yeah.
Imagine how much future pain he could have prevented just by not crafting these rings, though.
That would have been the good choice, wouldn't it? Well, as far as how they filmed this scene, I want to give a call out to the fact that they cut away from the bloody gruesomeness of the thumb cutting.
Yes.
I really appreciate this. I like being able to watch my shows entirely and not have to close my eyes.
Right, yeah.
And I also think it just raises the quality of the show to require actors like Charles Edwards to play the scene in his face rather than just relying on cheap shock value.
I think, honestly, they probably could have, had a, like you said, a cheap shock value here. They might have, I wouldn't even be surprised if started it, but they did a shot of his face as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if he did such a good job doing it. They're like, we don't need to do it, Like, it's better, like, how good he overdid what they thought they could get from the brutal shock value that a lot of people would go in for,
Yeah, well, if that's the case...
I'm not saying that's the case. I don't know.
I don't know either, but if that were the case, then it just says all the more about the quality of the acting that the scene had.
That's what I'm saying, though. It was such good acting, I wouldn't be surprised if they had to choose between the shock value, which some directors like to do, or the acting, and the acting was that much better, or if they were planning it from the beginning. Either way, they wouldn't have planned on that. They probably would have had to plan on something like a cheap shock value, or even like a shot to the ceiling as he screamed. But if his name's, I honestly didn't know. But Charles Edward Celebrimbor has had some, especially in this episode, great acting.
I agree.
I feel like the directors could have trusted him to have a shot of his face while going through this.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you 100%, and I would like to thank Charles Edward at this time. I also like that Celebrimbor, his speech to Galadriel is pretty awesome. I think he still should have just left. I'm glad he gave her the rings and all that, and that was I mentioned earlier. He still does one more thing to impede Sauron. He cuts his thumb off and gives the rings again to Galadriel. But I think he shouldn't have gone back.
Mm-hmm. You're advising him to just run?
Just run.
I would say giving the rings to Galadriel is sufficient cause to do what he did to stop Sauron in any way he can.
I suppose the question is, so he went back for neither for honor, I suppose, is the closest reason I could say to explain why he did it in his own words. But he did stall Sauron. He had to, as we will cover, torture it out of him, which delays him chasing Galadriel. But I think he might have been better off and wasted more of Sauron's time if he ran in another direction other than where Galadriel went.
Mm-hmm. I see your point. I think this was him trying to make up for the evil that he regrets doing.
Well, and I get on one hand also. Like he says, he has a responsibility as the Lord of Eregion to not, leave the sinking ship as well.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't put it that way, but that's kind of how I took it. And I get, when you're the leader of anything like a city, a project, and it's burning to the ground, you need to stay with it, I suppose. But I feel like there's more than just Eregion. Eregion's lost. We have the entire fate of Middle Earth to worry about now,
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure that, his grief about what he's done is influencing his decisions as well.
Yeah.
I mean, he has such complete honesty regarding the part he played in his own deception when he's talking to Galadriel. And I really like that. I think he's right to claim some of the responsibility here. He entirely could have picked up on some of the red flags that Sauron dropped, but Sauron's really good at manipulating as well. It's a both and. It's totally Sauron's fault for manipulating, but maybe Celebrimbor could have not listened to things that were flattering and ego-stroking.
With the way that this show is depicting Sauron as a manipulator, I have a hard time agreeing with Celebrimbor in this regard, but it is still good of him to try to take responsibility for his hand in it. And again, this might be a leadership thing. Like, he's not just in charge of himself, so maybe he does need to own up to it a bit more, because there are so many lives that got lost because of his actions, Yeah. Whereas if he just ruined his own life, it'd be hard to blame him for Sauron manipulating him.
And there's stuff that he did on his own, like writing a lying letter to his king.
Okay, but if it wasn't Sauron and this was Anatar or just him on his own, like, that wouldn't be a mortal sin or such a bad defect that it makes him irredeemable, or
he's not irredeemable.
Shouldn't be, like, it hardly would have been punished. Like, on a cosmic sense, he should have gotten a slap on the wrist. It's just because Sauron was there to exploit that and, like, kind of like make the wound, the moral wound, kind of fester and spread it out and take as far as it can go to as much harm as it could cause,
But Celebrimbor knew he was doing wrong, is my point.
Yeah, I feel like there's a bit of a difference between like Celebrimbor felt like he was being a little bit like cheeky or a little bit sassy or something like that. Honestly, he didn't think he was committing an egregious sin, you know.
JD, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Let's say that your scientists on the Manhattan Project decided that they were going to tell the president that they were shutting down the nuclear program. They weren't going to make any more bombs, but then they decided to make 16 more bombs after. Is that just being cheeky?
Do the rings don't destroy, though?
I mean, these 16 are.
I would say the people are doing the destroying for the rings, right?
It's not a perfect analogy, but these are serious items that he's crafting. He knows that they turn hearts. We talked about how
terrifying that could be.
Yeah, and he's just going and creating a whole bunch more of these with deception as an ingredient.
Okay, but well, it's hard to say, because maybe if the scientist thought he was talking to a avatar of God, then he would have every right to do that. That's about the only like distinction. If he was just doing it because he thought he could, but like if there were, because Sauron came and said he was Anatar, right? And Anatar's like a known messenger of the gods of like gifts and craftsmen, I think they said.
Let me unpack a little bit there. Anatar is not a known entity before this.
Oh, okay. Okay, he made all that up. Got it. Okay.
But Sauron used to be the underling of Aule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, but Anatar claimed he was an underling to, like, he claimed that basically he had the same position but was working for a different god or something, right?
Yeah, Sauron used to work for Aule.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And he said, when he said I'm Anatar, he said I work for Aule? Yeah,
except that he doesn't anymore. Yeah. And the name Anatar is not one that's recognized. It's not like that was his old name or something.
So it was a false one.
Yeah.
So he lied. But still, he said that he was like a messenger. Like he claimed Aule. So it's kind of asking like Celebrimbor was asked to kind of work behind his king's back at the behest of a messenger of a god, he assumed.
Which should be highly suspect.
Yeah, perhaps.
It should also be highly suspect that Galadriel said not to treat with him, and then it should be highly suspect that Halbrand comes along and says, yeah, I've been lying this whole time, and I'm going to tell you the truth, and only you the truth, because you're so smart and clever that you see right through me.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I still think, even with the making the extra nukes behind the president's back metaphor, there's some problems with it I could pick apart, but it does help me understand a bit better on how grievous his mistakes were.
Yeah. So I don't think he's wrong to claim some part of the responsibility. This is absolutely also Sauron's fault. I am not saying that this is all Celebrimbor's fault.
Sure,
I just think he's right to claim some of the responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. Like, another thing is, does he know how they, like, from the start of it, only Elrond seems to suspect the rings seem to be dangerous at all, and that's only because he knew Sauron had a hand in it, which Celebrimbor didn't know Sauron had a hand in it at all. You know, nobody was really opposed to the rings before Sauron came up either, so I don't know if he's seen these as nukes either, is the thing. But he
knows their works to change the hearts, though.
Yeah, and they do end up being, even if they are more powerful than he imagined, it's still his responsibility in a way if he created them.
Yeah.
So I'm of split mind on this, but I still feel like, I don't know, it's just so hard. I think I hate Sauron so much. Like, I love to hate him, but I hate him so much for doing this.
He's absolutely terrible for this.
I just don't want to split hairs about Celebrimbor's responsibility, even if maybe there is some. I'm comfortable pitting it all on Sauron, even if Celebrimbor's not.
There's plenty of blame to go around.
There's a lot that went wrong, yeah. So he confronts Sauron with a few of his men. Sauron absolutely had nothing to fear, and it was painfully obvious to Sauron even. He didn't seem like to break a sweat as he was surrounded by his guards.
Yeah, because he's infiltrated everyone there. He can control everyone. He's got his hooks into the the guards as well. And, he just turns his hands and the guards kill each other.
Mm-hmm.
And this makes me think about how it's the Saurons of the world who cause good people to turn on each other like that, even to the point of killing each other, or not to the point of killing each other, just to fighting and not talking anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say which was more, like, this was almost just the cherry on top, and I'd say the non-fighting, the non-violent people turning on Celebrimbor was really what caused more damage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, these people were the final Hail Mary to stop Sauron, and it didn't work, and he could control them to kill each other. But really, the people not trusting him once he escaped and realized the illusion and the siege was still going on, I don't know how much good he could have done, but if everybody realized and listened to Celebrimbor at that time, things could have ended up differently. There might have not been the 9 rings for men, at least, if he had support from everybody else. But that was, like, I think, like you don't always have to turn people to kill each other. You could just turn them to not trust each other, and it could do more harm,
For sure.
After seeing Sauron as a sympathetic villain for these last 2 seasons, well, a villain for the last season, I should say, to see him suddenly torturing a helpless Celebrimbor was quite a whiplash on, like, how sadistic and cruel he could be.
Mm-hmm. He is both. I like how they're balancing this. Like, they're not backing off on how bad Sauron is. Sauron is bad.
Yeah. And they, like, up until now, he was, like, kind of in Adar territory, whereas, like, he has questionable methods, which doesn't work out, but I really understand where he's coming from. I don't think doing this to Celebrimbor was at all justified in any, even if we buy his story and believe it wholeheartedly, I don't think this would have been the right thing to do, obviously.
But this is it's the logical conclusion of allowing your ends to justify your means. At what point is the cost too great? And it's a very slippery slope to start sliding down. Yeah,
he just he's not squeamish about it. He doesn't feel apologetic. He's just very fine with it. He doesn't delight in it as far as we could see, but he just doesn't care about doing this to Celebrimbor.
Maybe he's been desensitized from his time with Morgoth.
Yeah. So during this intense interrogation, Celebrimbor mentions that he'll be dead soon, and I feel like it may have struck a nerve. Sauron seems pretty bitter that he won't be able to see an afterlife in this scene.
Yeah, I thought this was a great interpretation. Sauron does know that he won't be welcome in Valinor. The eternal fate of a fallen Maya and the eternal fate of an elf are slightly different, though perhaps not different enough to not strike that nerve.
Yeah.
An elf is going to have his soul go to the halls of Mandos, and there's like a place set aside for disembodied elves. Sauron would probably have to go to, let me back up. Melkor was also held in the halls of Mandos. Mandos was in charge of him for a while, so I imagine that might be where Sauron would go. So maybe they would go to the same location, but I can't imagine that they'd
get the same reception.
Yeah, get the same reception, or be maybe like on the same level, on the same floor.
Yeah.
I bet there'd be a deep holding cell for Sauron.
So I'm a bit confused because I thought even after the ring was destroyed, Sauron just is stuck in Middle Earth just as a disembodied spirit.
Post-ring destruction, Sauron remains as a spirit very weak, and I would imagine he probably stays in Middle-earth just because he's not going to sit around for some jail time in Mandos.
Oh, yeah. So either way, so his option is jail time in Mandos or being forced to haunt Middle-earth, but being unable to affect it ultimately in the end. And now Sauron at this point doesn't know that this is his fate, though. But
he knows he's not going to be welcome in Valinor.
Yeah, definitely the way that it was depicted to me. And at this point, Sauron dies. He just comes back as a person on Middle Earth, or as a Valar, or whatever he is.
He hasn't fallen far enough yet.
Yeah. And so Celebrimbor here does fall to Sauron. I think it's very I said visually gruesome. It gets pretty brutal there at times.
It does.
I feel like it more so than the films, but it definitely had the weight. There was a few times in these two episodes where I felt like this has the weight of the Peter Jackson films in one way or the other. And Celebrimbor's death was definitely one of those times.
I agree. I think a lot of Celebrimbor and Anatar's time falls into that category with the grandiosity of it.
Yeah. So with how cruel Sauron was with Celebrimbor, Adar kind of got it off easily. I get the irony in him going the same way that he killed him, but I feel like Sauron might have drawn it out more after how he treated Celebrimbor, who he ostensibly was his friend.
He had places to be and things to do.
Yeah.
He had pressing business with his ex, you say.
Yeah. He still has pressing business with his ex. This whole scene between Galadriel and Sauron, they were fighting, but it was just a very messy breakup. That's all I could think of this whole time.
Which is not a thought that I had at all when I was watching this.
Did you watch it at all since I've presented that interpretation?
I mean, you've been talking about the Halbrand Galadriel romance for a while, and it's just not something I see as a romance. I mean, Halbrand was proposing to Galadriel that she be the light queen to his rule, but I feel like that was less romance and more politics. I feel like Halbrand doesn't have any actual I feel like so Sauron doesn't actually have any real feelings at all. Like in the end, he just pretends to have feelings, whatever's convenient for him to get what he wants. And I feel like he is playing with Galadriel, who has some feelings, although she knows better. She just seems to have some sort of feelings for him. And I'm not saying that you're reading it wrong or that your reading is invalid. I'm saying I struggle with this reading partially because Galadriel has already been married to Celeborn, and elves are incredibly monogamous.
Yeah. But she thinks her husband's dead.
And I understand where this would be entirely fine for a human to get interested in someone else at this point, but elves are not the same as humans. When an elf dies, his soul goes to Mandos and he can be reembodied. You're still married after death when you're with an elf. You don't fall in love with somebody else and marry somebody else. There's one time in elven history where this happened, and it was extremely messy and motivates a whole bunch of events for the entire Silmarillion.
There's a couple of things here. So the politics, first of all, if she remarried for politics, that would still be just as much of an issue in that hierarchy.
It would be a terrible choice on her part.
Yeah.
100%.
But so I also feel like certain sects of Christianity that believe the same thing about marriage too. After your husband dies, you shouldn't remarry because you'll be married. Like, marriage is forever, you know. And some people take the.
I've actually never heard of any sect that believes that.
I thought I did. If I'm wrong on that,
I don't know all of my sect's views on marriage, so there could well be. I'm just not aware of any.
I know a lot of them, you know, lean very heavily on the until death do us part. So death did them part, but there are some that do. But I feel like even if it's not an official church stance,
I bet historically there's somebody who believed that.
Yeah. And I feel like even if that's not, like I was about to say, not an official church stance, like definitely how a lot of people react to death and stuff like that. Like, they're not interested in anybody else, and they believe in the afterlife where they'll see the person that they love, and that's fine. But I feel like some people who have that belief would still. And I think this is the reason this is how I think Galadriel probably believes that about her husband and still has romantic tension that she knows better to pursue with, specifically Sauron in this case.
And I'm fine with them making an adaptation to tell a different story, but that's not how elves work. Elves don't fall in love with other people after.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that Galadriel has fallen in love with Sauron. That's still even going too far. But I get what you're saying. Like, an infatuation wouldn't happen because that's not how elves work.
Yeah.
Didn't you mention before that either Galadriel or Elrond... No, Elrond ends up marrying her daughter, but Galadriel's husband was just there for all of this in the Silmarillion, you said?
Yes.
So the fact that the writers changed that really also makes me wonder why, you know. Maybe it's just because they want people to feel this tension without having to actually change the canon. and they just want people to feel this tension because they know that that's what is, in every show has, love interest and triangles and shipping and stuff like that. And I'm not like saying any of these really are good relationships, and I'd be happy if they got together. But I do think that the tension feels like it's supposed to be there, at least.
I think in general, the elven romances based on your reading would be more humanized than they are, than how elves are supposed to work in the greater canon of Lord of the Rings.
So yeah, and then in the greater canon of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, like his view of elves and stuff like that are very much influenced by the time he's from and his religion, and then how high in esteem he held the elves. Like, this was at the time like what he thought would be, the most righteous and honorable way to feel those feelings for people, right? To feel romance it's supposed to be eternal and for one person and monogamous.
And it's not that you're wrong in anything you say, but it's also what suits immortal beings.
Yeah, I won't argue that at all. It does.
Because there's nothing in the Legendarium to say that humans shouldn't remarry after their spouses die.
Sure, yeah.
Humans are just different than elves. If you are immortal and your spouse can be re-embodied, this is just a fundamentally different situation than a human is ever going to find himself in.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And the shows have definitely had a few times, like, where we mentioned that they didn't quite understand how elves worked compared to the Silmarillion.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just struggle with the that's not how elves work part.
Which is fair. But anyway, this fight scene, I felt like had a lot of tension here. Galadriel answers, like, one of the first lines is, "Please, you think too much of me." Or I'm sorry.
Galadriel accuses Sauron of bold, complete plans that he's been orchestrating everything this entire time. Sauron responds back with, "Please, you think too much of me."
Yes, and I feel like this was very clearly Sauron, like, flirting with Galadriel. Like, it just felt very much like that to me.
And in typical me fashion, I'm going to entirely ignore the comment about flirting and talk about that I want to cite this line as textual support for my interpretation that Sauron was just improvising in season 1.
Yeah.
Because I actually think that this is a genuine representation of what it was he was doing. Not planning and plotting this entire thing until he had the ring plan at the very end.
I don't trust Sauron enough to buy his "please you think it too much of me" at face value. It could be I'd say it's not bad textual support, but it's from the deceiver.
It is, but I don't think that my believing that he was improvising was going to come back to deceive me later on.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm on the fence either way about this. I need more. I need season 3. I could see it going either way.
Oh, I'm completely open to more information. Please give me more information.
I think, so as this fight starts, Galadriel needs to get out of there. She just needs to run.
I'm seeing a pattern.
Why don't they consider this more? I don't know. Especially as we go on with what happens. She ends up just running in the end anyway, basically, after she loses the rings.
I really enjoyed this fight just for seeing Sauron using his shape-shifting abilities.
Yes, that hit when he made her fight herself. That was pretty cool, and I think some great some sort of metaphor or something too.
Yeah,
I like that she said, "You wish to heal Middle Earth, heal yourself." It's absolutely the hardest breakup line ever. He's going throughout the fight trying to convince her to join him and have her help him heal Middle Earth. But so Galadriel ends up falling, getting the rings taken, and she jumps off a cliff. Why didn't she just do this to begin with, before he got the 9 rings, if she can just survive a cliff fall?
Yeah, I don't think even an elf could survive a fall like that.
No, yeah. I remember way back you mentioned an elf couldn't survive falling off a cliff, for example, and I think this is exactly what you had to be thinking of.
I think this was exactly what I was envisioning and complaining about.
I was bouncing some ideas in my head for generous takes on this. None of them really survived.
No.
It's just bad.
Our generous takes didn't survive the fall, but Galadriel did.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few. The best one I think I came up with was it was not an accurate depiction of the cliff. It's just how big it seemed to Galadriel. That's about all I had, which is pretty. That's like a pretty thin sauce. That's watering it down quite a bit.
Maybe she survives her cliff fall the same way Aragorn survives his.
Yeah, I don't know. There, adrenaline, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't get it. She shouldn't have been in one piece. There should have been like an impact crater. It was crazy high up. He does rage kill an orc after she does this, though. That's pretty good bad guy stuff.
Yeah.
In writing, it always makes a bad guy seem like really like a good bad guy when they do something like that.
Not something Adar did.
Yeah, no, Adar never took his aggression out on anybody. And the other orc who had to just run, like, that, it gets me. That really is like, ooh, this is not somebody you want to mess with. Yeah.
The orcs have ended up with a worse deal because of this.
Yeah, definitely. It's right from, like, hour one, even.
Yep.
So she gets stabbed by the crown, and it is some sort of spiritual wound. I was wondering, is this the first Morgul wound?
Yes. I believe I foreshadowed this as well when we were talking about how much I hate Morgul wounds.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this with Keely's Morgul arrow,
sure.
And I said that this showed up in Rings of Power, and it bugged me here too, and here we are, and it's still bugging me. I need them to stop with this Morgul wound crap.
Mm-hmm.
Elves can't be drawn into the spiritual dimension when they're already there. Yeah. Galadriel already exists in the spiritual world in addition to the physical world. She's not going to get drawn in there. She's already there. Mm-hmm. She belongs there. And this is more about you just don't understand how elves work, I guess. Mm-hmm. Or more accurately, that's not really fair. I should say they're telling a different story about how elves work. Yeah. And this is the one point that I just can't get past. And it is a fault on my part that I struggle so hard with this.
I mean, it really, the problem is it really even without that deeper down to the lore, it really defangs and makes the Morgul wounds seem less scary. It's not this, like, and with the lore explanation, them being sucked to another plane is absolutely a terrifying thing, and it just doesn't work out with an elf, and then it just makes it seem like it's some sort of weird black wound that doesn't really have any metaphysical or interesting mechanics to it. It's just the solution to this was for Keely and for Galadriel in the scene to come up with something other than the Morgul wound that still was like a festering, dark, evil, like poison of some sort,
Yeah, exactly. Like if there was some
they could come up with some really cool, interesting poison that has a cool name. Here's
an idea. Sauron cuts his hand on the crown before he stabs her with it, and there's like, to not scientificate this, but, some sort of a Sauron poison, blood infection.
Yeah.
Some mystical contact there. I mean, it was his blood that ended up in the rings that corrupted them. I bet that Sauron's blood could make a corrupting wound.
It definitely has some sort of mystical power to it. So, yeah, they could have done a lot to make this... They just didn't have to use the word Morgul, is all I'm like, and things would have been fine. Yeah. They should just came up with another word, and they could have had one line of dialogue about it in The Hobbit, and then used the same word here and had a weird tie-in that worked, and it would have been cool,
Yeah.
But instead they tried to tie it to the movie, but then defeated the entire... It defangs, if we take all of this as canon, which is the temptation of a lot of people why they don't like Lord of the Rings and will say it's not canon because of stuff like this and other concerns that they have that I think are less compelling. But this is a good one to like get mad at considering this canon, because this whole Morgul wound business and The Hobbit too is like it really, really, if you watch this somehow before you watch The Fellowship and then you see Frodo get stabbed by a Morgul weapon, it just completely like makes it not such a terrifying thing anymore, because it just kind of, it's overdone and the mechanics of it get muddled and messy because they just want to keep calling back and referencing it,
And going back to our discussion of canon in our very first episode, I want to remind you that adaptations, while they can have their own canon internally, are basically never canon with a capital C for the Legendarium. They are their own thing.
Yeah, I will say that, like, the Rings of Power and the Peter Jackson films kind of feel like they're in their own canon. Like, they feel like they're supposed to be in the same universe.
Yeah, the relationship between Rings of Power and the Peter Jackson movies, the New Line Cinema movies, is nebulous at this point, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't think there's any, like, official production. I mean, they both use Lord of the Rings, but, like, it just starts to get messy when you start to really consider, like you said, the adaptation. Like, so if you're just going off the text as the only canon and nothing that the movies put in, it also calls to question a lot of the fan theories that are based heavily on canon. Like, also, like there's, like, explanations, and the best fan theories are just like actual scientific theories, like, pretty well understood, derived from the data in the world. You've had a few, I can't think of any offhand to mention, but fan theories that you said were technically fan theories, but the way that you explained them using textual evidence felt like they were so well founded on the text that it was good. But I feel like when you have adaptations kind of flying in the face of that, it feels like it's just less cool, because those fan theories are really cool, and it'd be cooler if they just went with those, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And it would just, like, wrap it into the greater canon. Like, they can't be strict canon, but they can be, like, one ring removed, right?
One ring removed.
One ring removed, yeah.
Yep.
So it just kind of distanced these works from what we understand as, like, good Tolkien theory, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
That Morgul wound business is hard to see. To cover this up, Gil-galad saying that Galadriel is peaceful company while she's unconscious was a really funny, subtle burn.
I love that. It was a high moment for his character.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention that Arondir recovers way too quickly. He was stabbed with Adar, and he should have died there. And here
I thought he was dead.
Yeah, but no, he shows up at the scene here with Galadriel, and he's fine.
I feel like the way they shot the scene where he gets stabbed, like, they were going to kill him, and then they decided last minute not to and put him back in the scene.
Yeah, so it just felt incongruous to me.
Yeah, and he definitely didn't seem to be very affected by the wound whatsoever.
Yeah, and I get that elves heal quickly, but that was a little too quickly.
Yeah, maybe they got a really good poet. Okay, so that was for me, not to go into too much, that was the main interesting part of these two episodes for me. That was, like, the meat of it, I feel like.
Yeah, but we have some little side things to wrap up. We have the other storylines to talk about. Well, there's more than just a few sides to go over, so we are having to cut this episode into 2 episodes. You'll get your things in 2 weeks. See you then.